All right, I'm always looking for projects to do, and a lot of times they're kind of messy. So I need a table that I can get dirty, be it bloody or whatever the case is. If I'm cutting meat on it, boning out meat, whatever the case is. And it seems like you never have a table that's big enough. So in today's video, we're going to work on a portable table, basically a tabletop. I'm going to take a piece of plywood, I'm going to cover it with vinyl. I'm going to show you how I do that and how it fills my needs and meets my purposes. So stay tuned and we'll get right into it. So there's a few items we're going to need in order to make this happen. The first thing I like to use is a good old carpenter square. I've got a 60-inch metal ruler that I like to use on my fabric. Obviously a pair of shears or scissors that will cut the fabric, measuring tape, and I'm using a air-powered staple gun. It doesn't necessarily have to be an air-powered staple gun. It can be one of those mechanical staple guns that you can just pound them in. I like to use air just because I have it. I've done a lot of upholstery as well, so I have the equipment, so that's what I'm going to use. One other thing we'll need is a pen or a pencil for marking our fabric. So we'll get our supplies together here and do some measurements and get into it. Okay, so the fabric I'm going to use, I've got a short end piece of vinyl here. There's nothing special to it, it's just an automotive vinyl that's just a short end of a roll. I think there's going to be enough here to get done what we need to do. So to start with, we need to measure our board, or whatever we're going to cover that we're going to use for our table. Looks like mine's about 35 by about 37 and a half. So 35 by 37, one way you can measure it. Set the board off to the side here. Okay, here's my roll of vinyl. I like to start off with a square edge. This has got some rough edges here from the prior patterns and things that have been cut, so I'm going to square it off. And you know, there's a lot of talk on what you can use for marking your vinyl. Chalk is very a good one. Well, I have a pencil here. I think I'll switch over to chalk. You know, there's a lot of different ideas on how to mark your vinyl. You know, the obvious one that comes to mind is people want to grab a pen, a ballpoint pen or a Sharpie even, to mark their vinyl. Some may want to use a pencil. To be honest with you, the best way to mark your vinyl or leather or anything else for that matter that you're going to cut is with chalk. The beauty of using chalk is you can take it off, you can remove it. You can take a blower with air and you can blow it and it'll get rid of the chalk. Pen has a tendency to leave a permanent mark. Sharpie has a permanent mark as well. Pencil's real hard to remove. That graphite in it is hard to get off your vinyl. So I prefer chalk. And the other thing with a Sharpie, it'll make a very sharp line to begin with, but with time it will spread out. That ink will spread on your vinyl. So let's get going here. Let's get our edge squared up. All right, you can see that marked really well, that chalk did. Now there's several different kinds of chalk out there. This particular one I'm using is white chalk. Yellow chalk is actually a little bit harder. It won't break as easy, but I have a supply of white right now, so that's what we're going to use. I'm going to take my shears here and I'm going to cut this line all the way across, and I'm going to start out with a square edge. Alright, that'll go into this trash bin. Now, we have measured our board. We know it's about 35 by 37. So you can actually make your vinyl a couple of inches larger than that. You have one way you can do it is, I don't like drawing on the face of my vinyl either. I rather mark the back of my vinyl. That way I don't have anything on my finished product. So we could take our ruler or our measuring tape and we could mark out here, like I said, we want it to be about 2 inches larger than our board because we're going to pull it around and staple it. So, you know, I could take my ruler and I could measure out, so it'd be 30, we want that 2 inches on each side. So if it's 35 and a half, we're going to want to make it roughly 39 and a half, say 40 inches the one direction, and 37 plus 4 on the other direction is going to be 41. Okay, that's one way to do it. I've done this so long that I don't usually take the time to do that, especially on a board this small. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my board on my vinyl, like so. And then I'm just going to measure 2 inches on each side. Now I know my square on the one side is 2 inches wide, so I'm just going to put that there, slide my board over to it. That side's at 2 inches. This side here, just a little long. Okay, over here, my 2-inch side. I put my square along there. Take my chalk, make a measurement on this side. Same thing on this side. Take my square, put a 2-inch mark along that side. I'll take my ruler to complete and connect those lines. Now the same thing applies up here. Okay, set my ruler aside. Now I'll just take my shears and I will just go ahead and cut along my line. And all the way across the top. And there I have my material cut, my piece of vinyl. Okay, there's one thing we need to cover about vinyl, and that's stretch. Vinyl across the roll will stretch. You notice when I pull on that, you can see there's quite a bit of stretch. If I pull down the length of the vinyl, it doesn't stretch very good. There's two other ways vinyl stretches, and that's from the corners. If I grab it on the corner here and the corner here, there's quite a bit of stretch in there. We call that on the bias. On the angle is the bias. So that's just something to keep in mind when we go to start tacking down our vinyl, is the stretch. Because we're going to want to pull it tight so we don't have wrinkles. And this would apply for anything that you wanted to cover in fabric, but in vinyl in particular, has quite a bit of stretch to it. And there's a method to the madness here of how we're going to staple this vinyl down. We're going to start in the centers on each of the 4 sides. We'll staple it down just a little bit in the centers. On the sides here where we have quite a bit of stretch, we'll stretch it as tight as we can, or not as tight as we can, but we'll get some pretty tightness in there. Definitely up the roll on the vinyl, we want to get it as tight as possible. And then we'll go to our corners and stretch that bias out, and then we'll start tacking it down. So, that being said, let's start into this project. Okay, so this direction is up the roll. So I want to get a little bit of a tack started there. So see, I put 3 staples in right there. Now let's turn the board. Get it out here to the edge. I'm going to grab it. We're going to stretch that around. Now you'll notice on this side, the difference here is a little bit larger than on this side. That's because I'm stretching it this direction, so it's going to grow on this side. Turn this over briefly so you can see it. Okay, you'll notice on this way in this direction, it's nice and tight. We don't have any wrinkles. But you'll notice here on the sides, we've got a wrinkle going on there, and that's because of the stretch, that bias. So we'll work on that right now. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to grab it in the corner, and I'm going to pull it, and I'm just going to tack one side. Now let's take a look and see what we got on the other side. Okay, you see that's all nice. We don't have any wrinkles in there. So we can go back to tacking our vinyl down. Okay, now you'll notice we've got about this much salvage there and there. So that's our goal. We want to pull this and keep that as a straight line along there if we all possibly can. So we'll pull it. I like to go to the center, tack it down, and then just work my way that direction. All right, corners. This is how we're going to finish the corner. Okay, so I've got to pull that tight, staple it into the corner, take my shears, my scissors, I'm kind of cutting at a little bit of an angle in there. Anyway, kind of cut that out. We want that so it's not quite as thick a fabric. Now when I pull on this, I'm going to pull it, fold that in, and fold that around, just like that. Come in here with my gun, get that stapled down, swap hands here, gotta be a little bit multi-handed, ambidextrous. Okay. Got her all stapled down. All we got left to do is trim our excess off. Alright, there's our work surface. Got a nice vinyl covered piece of wood that we can use for a table. We can get it dirty. The nice thing about vinyl is you can wash it and clean it right up. So, that's how we're going to do our table. So that's a pretty simple process. It's not that difficult really. Just got to remember that you have a couple of extra inches on each side of your board. The important things to remember is your stretch. Across the roll of vinyl has a lot of stretch, and the corners on the bias has a lot of stretch. As you go up and down the roll, the fabric doesn't stretch that much. Just remember that as you work that stretch out. Start in your centers, then go to your corners, and then make up the difference in between. So if you got any questions, go ahead and let me know. Appreciate it if you like this video, if it was helpful, like, subscribe. That helps me out a bunch. And anyway, look forward to doing the next video with you. Thanks for watching.